highways to success. Fuck stress, we way too blessed. Fuck death. If heaven take me, it's gonna be in something fresh. Just make sure my suit fresh.
All right, guys. Hello and welcome to Redmond STEM Center's first web seminar. And today we will be featuring Kevin Tran, and he'll be talking about his pathway, his journey through high school, through college, and into his work at Microsoft as a software engineer, and how alternative paths are often more effective than the traditional one. Enjoy. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Eric. Let me just move the stream here. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the stream, and thanks for coming in. My name is Kevin Tran, as Eric just introduced me. I'm here with you today, thanks to Redmond STEM Center. But let me quickly talk about an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. So first, I'm going to just introduce myself, who I am, what I've done, what I'm doing right now. And then I'm going to talk you through kind of a chronological timeline of where I've been in the past and how I got to where I am right now, sitting in front of this computer talking about myself. So my journey to college, my life during undergrad and life after undergrad, and now my current time at Microsoft. So first, let me give you a quick couple of basics of who I am. So first, I'm a software engineer at Microsoft Azure. And I'm also a mentor at RSC Team 7461, which is how I got started with Redmond STEM Center and how I got acquainted with all the people here. And where I've been in the past is I graduated from a high school called Oxford Academy down in Cypress, California. It's in the suburbs of LA County. And after that, I graduated as class of 2017 at UC Berkeley. And so first I want to talk about kind of alternate paths and how the first path isn't always necessarily like the best one to get you where you want to be, and there's always other places you can go to get to where you want to go in life. And so starting out, in high school I kickstarted a lot of our school's STEM programs. So I started things like I helped integrate our math club, science club, and everything together, and I started with the help of a couple of my friends in the RSC program at my high school. I also did a lot of other tech things behind the scenes at school. So things like we would always have morning announcements. We would always have people who run like the rallies and all those things that you would be able to do in person. So I was pretty much your generic high school nerd in high school. And so because our high school was more for college preparatory, there were a lot of universities that I knew I wanted to attend. I knew that I wanted to pursue computer science because I had a large background in technology and I really loved working with computers, websites, whatever. As a result of this, I knew that I really wanted to go to UC Berkeley. They have a really great computer science program. My older brother went to Cal, and I really wanted to live in the Bay Area since I had already been in the SoCal area all my life, and so I wanted to kind of try something different and see what it's like to be in the Bay Area. A lot of the challenges for me was that my parents immigrated to the U.S. and they didn't really have anything when they came here, so I'm a first-generation low-income student, and so throughout my high school career, I had to navigate things like living in poverty and not really having many resources to get to where I wanted to be. And on top of that, I also had a particularly difficult junior year because of some family issues that I experienced, and that really affected my academic performance in junior year, which, as most of you know, is a very crucial year in high school. And so as a result, and unfortunately, I applied to Berkeley in addition to a lot of other colleges in my senior year, but I didn't get into Berkeley. And I even tried to appeal to Berkeley to get in and see what my paths were to get into Berkeley. But unfortunately, I couldn't get in, and I did get into a couple of other California universities like UC San Diego, UC Irvine, and a couple other ones. But I I was leaning towards going to UC San Diego because I thought that was the next other college I wanted to go to, because they also had a pretty good computer science program. But I immediately rejected the idea of going to community college because I just didn't think that it was the right step for me. And so I talked to my brother about it, and one night we sat down and we just looked at some numbers, looked at some data, and what we found out was that it made a lot more financial sense to transfer. Since we were a low-income family, I would be able to get a lot more financial aid if I went to community college and just saved up money, worked during my time, and I would still be able to apply again to Berkeley 2 years after that moment if I had went to community college. And when I came out of this this discussion with my brother, I realized that this was definitely the better choice. And even though that I initially rejected the idea of going to community college. And so here was my plan. My plan was to attend community college for 2 years. And in that time, I would want to hone all the professional skills that I needed to be a software engineer. And while doing that, I wanted to take the best classes that I could get in community colleges so that I could still get essentially the same education that I would have gotten if I went to Berkeley. And after those steps, I would try to transfer to Berkeley, and hopefully after that, I would get my bachelor's degree in computer science. And so I started attending community college. The thing about California community colleges are that they're really designed to make transferring pretty frictionless and pretty easy. I don't mean that it's simple to transfer, but they make the experience a lot better to navigate. It's not you have to go through a million different websites and find out which course matches to which. They have this centralized guide where you can just look at what course from which community college matches to which course in a four-year institution. And so this really helped me. And I know that UW also has a similar thing, which is a great tool. So that's definitely an option for transferring to UW. But California had this all centralized in one central website that you can see on the right-hand side there. And so I started taking classes at a lot of local community colleges that had a lot of different classes that I wanted to take. Some of them had better professors, some of them were just better structured, and so I just tried to optimize for the very best courses that I could take in all of the community colleges in the area. And I also tried to get as many connections as I could, because I knew that if I wanted to jumpstart my career, I needed to build up all the connections I could get. One thing that I learned during my time at community colleges was that professors are really good at teaching their courses. And what I mean by that is that they are there to teach. That's their primary purpose. And as a result, they just explain things in such clarity and such detail that I understood a lot of the things that I learned in community college. And in addition to that, during my time there, I joined a lot of programs that were aimed towards transfer students. A lot of the programs that were offered by some colleges helped me get a head start in applying to different colleges and seeing what the application processes were for places like Berkeley or USC or other places in the California area. And during my classes, I was also able to network with a lot of the professors I had, and I found a lot of great opportunities through that. So I was able to do research one summer, and I was able to go to one of NASA's facilities for a competition focused on community college students. And that was definitely a fantastic experience for me. And in the meantime, outside of school, I would try to engage with the community at large. During this time, there was a huge gathering of computer science students and engineers in the field, and this is when the community really grew. And so I was able to attend hackathons. I was able to go to career fairs from USC or UCI, and there were a lot of great opportunities available to me. And so to focus in on the idea of the community at large, a lot of the things that I did was I just searched. I just tried to look for every possible small thing that I could to network with other people and see what other people are doing in their field. So what I did was I kept a pulse on my area of interest. So there were Reddit subreddits that I would go to, there were Facebook groups that I would just browse in, and there's just so many things during that time that I was able to find a lot of great resources for myself. And I would definitely suggest leveraging these things, Googling or searching on Facebook or searching on Reddit. There's a ton of things that are available to your disposal nowadays that allows you to meet other people from these fields that you're interested in. And so when I went to hackathons, this is when hackathons were really getting big. I know they're a huge thing now and everybody does them, but this is when they were really just kind of getting started. And I overheard somebody talking about it at first, and that kind of piqued my curiosity because it just sounded cool. Hackathon. It sounds like a cool word. So I looked around about it, and I heard about this group on Facebook, and I searched Hackathon Hackers on Facebook, and I found a lot of great results. And another thing that I did was I searched on career college websites for career fair information because a lot of them held things like startup career fairs. Some of them held career fairs with employers in the local area, and a lot of other things. So if you know how to Google things really well, then that gets you really far, because if you know how to search for something, then you can probably find it pretty well. If you want to search for a PDF of some research paper, you can probably find it on Google, right? So it's a really great tool for you to find information about things you don't currently know about. And even through this passive absorption of information, you're not really talking to any other people. You're just kind of searching. You're kind of just lurking in the background, trying to see what's out there. You still learn a lot through this method, and I think it's a great way to just figure out what's out there. And during this time as well, I was also trying to find more professional experience. And so I was looking for any small job in the area that would hopefully let me put my skills as a computer scientist to the test. And so one thing that I became lead web developer at a small local company down in Irvine, California. And so I think the great thing here was leveraging my network. I think this is where my network really came in handy, because I asked around, and a lot of the adults that I knew were looking for people to do things like math tutors or startups or lots of other things. So I think if you want to invest your time in like talking to people, I think that finding professional experience is the best way to leverage your professional network. And it can be pretty difficult to do, but I think we'll touch on some important points later that we can talk about. But I was very lucky to have a network of people that I was comfortable asking for work. And so my first professional work experience was when I asked one of my friends if her workplace had open positions. And this wasn't like a software engineering firm or anything special. It was just a local signage shop where we made things like those exit signs or those ADA signs that you see in common buildings. And so I passed along my business card to her, and she was able to get me a job. I started out working in Adobe Illustrator, and I did some work in a machine shop. So I operated a CNC router. There was a lot of manual work involved in that, and I think it was a fun experience. But eventually down the line, I became the lead web developer for the website that we were trying to start, and that was a great avenue for me to express my interest in computer science. And so I talked a lot about searching for things, like searching for different opportunities or different groups of people in your field, and I also talked about networking and how that's really great for finding professional connections or a job in the field that you want to go to. But what if you don't know your field, or what if you don't really know what's out there? I think the main thing is surround yourself with a diverse community of people who you're comfortable talking to. So things like Redmond STEM Center. It's a great thing you're part of Redmond STEM Center, right? If you're not, just click the link just to the side there. It's right above the presentation. It's right there. You see it right there. And it's important because when you're around people that you, being around the right people is really important because it really sets your mindset to looking for opportunities, and it really helps you think about what you want to be in the future, where you want to go in the future. If you surround yourself with people who are interested in like quantum cryptography or things like that, then maybe you'd also be interested in seeing what that's all about. And so that's why these communities are really important. And on top of that, you have to be open-minded on trying new things. If you don't really know what you want to do, then maybe it's a good time to try new things and see what might be interesting. You never know how something is going to go until you actually try it, right? Or until you actually see what is there for you in that field. And so on top of that, I think it's also great to reflect every now and then on what path you're going down. If you want to go straight into computer science or something like that, maybe it's always good every now and then to just see where you are and see if there's anything else that you want to be adjacent to. So maybe something like, oh, I want to do computational biology, or I want to see how I can apply technology to education, how to educate other people like middle schoolers, high schoolers. I want to use technology to influence policy. I want to be able to use tech on a government level. There's a lot of things that you can use your skills and be adjacent to another field if you reflect and kind of look at the bigger picture instead of being just going straight into just straight tech. And I think that's really important. And so it's really fine if you don't know what you want to do right now, because you really have a lot of time. I know a lot of people who, after high school, they changed their majors a lot of different times, and even throughout college, they didn't really know what they wanted to do. And even then, they're pretty successful now, and they know pretty much what they want to do with their life and where they're heading for the future. And I know that there's a lot of pressure in figuring out what you want to do right now, especially when you're surrounded by so many awesome people who seem to have their life figured out. But I've been there. You're never alone in your struggles, and it's never a bad thing to not know what you want to do. And something that's great for it is I found that community college is great if you don't know exactly what you want to do, and I think it's great for discovering different paths for yourself. But anyway, let's talk back about college. And so I started applying back to Berkeley in fall of 2014. So this is my freshman year in college. And this time I had the help of a lot of college counselors who knew the process in and out of applying to Berkeley. And I knew better of how to structure my personal statements so that it would be more impactful for whoever's reading the essay. And so after I applied, I had a couple months of just nervously waiting for the news, and thankfully in March of 2015 I got the news that I was accepted, and I was really happy. I did consider other colleges in the area, but since I already knew that I really wanted to go to Berkeley, I SIR'd and went to Berkeley. And so I started in fall of 2015 at Berkeley. I joined a lot of great different clubs at Berkeley, attended all of the events that they had, career fairs, recruiting events, and just events to see whoever else is in the field joining clubs and all that stuff. That was a fantastic experience for me, and in the end, the plan worked out. The plan that I originally had worked out. I got to Berkeley. Now it was just up to the rest of the things that I wanted to do. How do I get to an actual job and everything like that? And so this is where I can talk a little bit about the opportunities that Berkeley gave me. And so at Berkeley, there were a lot of companies that had recruiting events. So every possible company wanted to recruit from the Bay Area. And so I think what's important here is to make a first impression, standing out amongst the crowd, and just being prepared. I think being prepared is one of the most important things that you can be at a big college, because you need to be ready to answer questions just like that, and you need to have an elevator pitch ready. And the great thing is there's a lot of help that you can use to get there. There's a lot of great people at universities who know what they're doing. So you maybe have a career center at your university, or there's peer group mentoring that you can do. These are really great ways of shaping your resume and making your elevator pitch and everything like that as perfectly as it can get to get the attention of great companies in the area. And in my time right now, I help out Microsoft recruiting in the Bay Area through resume reviews and interviews. So if you ever have any questions about how to navigate the process of applying for jobs and seeking internships and things like that, just let me know and I can definitely help you out with that. But now I want to reflect a little bit about my experience after high school and getting to Berkeley. The greatest thing I learned is that you can't reject an action if you don't understand its consequences. And what I mean by that is that initially I rejected the idea of going to community college, right? And that's because I didn't really think of it as the strongest path that I could go. But that's because I didn't really understand what was in that path of going to community college. But once I understood that it had a lot of great advantages for me, and I developed a great plan for me to get myself to where I wanted to be, I realized that was the better action and I took it. And this alternate path of going to community college or anything else in life, the alternate path is never the worst choice. It could always be potentially the better choice. You never know until you actually try it or until you figure out the advantages or disadvantages. And if you don't know something, I just seek out more information. I know it's more easier said than done. But if you really know how to Google, then you can find great resources out there that you wouldn't be able to find in just reading things on Reddit. And so after this time, I'm really glad that I went to community college. And I learned a lot during that time, and I grew a lot as a person during those 2 years. And so I'm really lucky that I had a really strong support network, and that I knew what I wanted to do. The 2 years in community college were definitely different than a traditional 4-year university because the social experience is different, the classes are different, and just everything about community college is a lot different. But even then, I wouldn't change anything about what I did because like I said, I had a great network, and I'm really glad that I was able to get what I wanted out of community college. Because out of those 2 years, I had a lot of time to focus even more narrowly on what I wanted to do and where I wanted to take a path in the future. And so not everybody knows what they want to do right out of high school. Some people take a lot of time to figure out what they want to major in and what they want to eventually do after college. And I think community college is a great way to really figure that out if you're struggling right now and you don't have, there's nothing that that is driving you right now in terms of like passion. I think community college is a great way to find where your passion might lie, and it's all about trying new things, like I said. And so with that, I want to talk about my time at Microsoft, but I will just look in the chat right now and see what's building up there. I always hear about the value of it, but I found it difficult to actually approach people outside of people I already know. And this is in regards to networking. Networking is definitely really difficult, and it's always really, sometimes it might feel kind of weird to have to reach out to people, and even figuring out who to reach out to, I think that's pretty difficult. But I think this is where searching can come in handy. It's you'll need to find out who to reach out to, and it's a difficult thing to get used to actually reach out to people. But I think that's the advantage of things like email. It cannot be impersonal but personal at the same time, and so just writing that draft out and making it impersonal, and then just forcing yourself to send that email to the person that you want to reach out to could always have some great advantages, and I'll talk more about that in the later slides. And another question in chat: finding a career path takes some time for some people, but how come you decided on computer science so quick in high school? Was it just a natural passion from robotics? That's a great question. How I got to my passion in computer science was first and foremost the people I was exposed around, And also my parents were thankfully really encouraging of me to go down the computer science route. And so I had always had this curiosity about computer science, because I used to make websites, and I would always love playing around and tinkering with the computer. And so because of that, I had this great interest of computer science, just because of all the tinkering I did. And on top of that, when I went to high school, we had a lot of people who were more STEM focused, and they really wanted to pursue careers like biology or engineering, like mechanical engineering or electrical engineering and things like that. And I think that helped me differentiate myself, because everybody had some passion that they wanted to do, and I had this inkling of I wanted to do tech. And so I explored it. I tried making websites, and that's everybody else was also showing how their passions could lead into something, leading clubs like HOSA, FBLA, etc. And along the same lines of that, I made websites. I tried to start technology crew and everything like that. And another question that just came in: can you talk a little bit more about your time at Berkeley? How did the teaching compare to your time at community college? What were the opportunities offered like, and what is the stigma about toxic competition true? That is a lot of questions, and those are definitely great questions. So at Berkeley, the teaching is definitely different, because I took a lot more upper division classes. Let me see how I can explain this best. I took more advanced classes at Berkeley than compared to the general education requirements that were required of me at Berkeley, because I cleared a lot of my general ed requirements that were required for Berkeley at community college. So things like multivariable math, linear algebra, my English and reading requirements were already completed by the time I went out of community college. And the teaching, what people say the most is that the teaching in these, what we call lower division classes at Berkeley, is not the best compared to the upper division classes. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I think if I had to put my own hypothesis to this, it's that community college professors are there to teach, and when they teach things like general ed requirements like multivariable, linear algebra, they excel at those things just because they have spent so much time teaching it, and they know where students get stuck. They know how to make sure that students understand a certain concept correctly. And so in that respect, it's a lot different, but it's hard to compare when we get to upper division courses like operating systems, networking, machine learning, because those aren't offered at the community college level. And I think that's where Berkeley really shines, because we have all these great professors at places like Berkeley, Stanford, where they teach machine learning, and it's just a lot better there. I don't know how to compare it to any other experience. The opportunities offered at Berkeley, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by the question, but if you're talking about career opportunities, what I can say about that is that, like I said, a lot of companies come to Berkeley to recruit, and so that you'll see companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, every big company you can think of, and even like government contractors will come, and Boeing, Northrop Grumman. I have a lot of friends who are working for every sort of big company in their respective fields. So things like mechanical engineering, there's Northrop Grumman, there's Boeing, etc. Tech, there's Microsoft, Google, Facebook, whatever. And every other field, there's a lot of opportunities. And so this is kind of a sampling of the opportunities that are available at Berkeley. And I think you'll find this at a lot of big colleges like CMU, Stanford, Caltech. There's a lot of opportunities there. And the stigma about toxic competition, that's a really what I think about the competition at Berkeley is that I felt a lot more collaboration there, because what the professors do, and this is true for every computer science class that I've taken, is that every professor will say, work together in groups and try to figure this thing out in a group, because that's what you're going to have to do in real life, right? So I think there's more opportunities to collaborate with others. I formed a lot of study groups. There are a lot of groups out there that helped each other on how to get this homework question correct. And that was never really penalized. It's only penalized if you just straight out cheat and don't credit them. But that wasn't the majority of cases at Berkeley. It might be more competitive when you have to declare a certain major. Like getting into computer science is a little difficult. But even then, I think that the opportunities to collaborate are much greater than the feeling of competition. I hope that answers your question. Earlier, you talked about standing out to job recruiters. Is that just the being prepared aspect? How do you stand out when you're in a school where everyone is just as bright and qualified as you? That's a good question, because it's really difficult to... It's really easy for me to just say, be prepared and try to stand out, but it's really harder to put that actually in practice. And I think to really stand out, what I think is great is... when we talk about what we do when we screen resumes at Microsoft. What we really like to look for is we like to look for passion. If you have a great passion for what you're doing in computer science, you have a lot of side projects, or you're really involved in this class as like a reader or a grader, or you're one of the head TAs or something, that really shows passion, and I think that is really how you stand out amongst a crowd. And when I say be prepared, I think what's really important is to have, to be able to sell yourself in the right way, like saying, hi, my name is Kevin. I'm a third year at UC Berkeley, and in the past I've worked with a lot of side projects. I've been a lead web developer at a small signage company, and here are a couple of side projects that I've done. I really want to work for Microsoft because something about the cloud or Windows. I think basically just having this, everything laid out for yourself and understanding the entire step of the process really helps you stand out amongst the crowd, and hopefully that helps. I think that's all the questions for now. Definitely leave them in the Twitch chat, and I'll hear them from Eric at the end of the presentation. But let's go ahead and start talking about my time at Microsoft. And so first, how did I get to Microsoft? I think it's a combination of there's a lot of luck, but there's also there's a good amount of skill and concentrated power of will. And I say that there's a lot of luck because there are a lot of steps where things could have gone wrong, but there are also a lot of times when things just came in the right way. So when I initially talked to the career fair recruiter about wanting to be at Microsoft, I think I was really lucky because it was a perfect time for it. There was a really long line, but I came in pretty early. And right then and there, we scheduled my first round interview and just went off from there. So I think there's a lot of luck there. There are a lot of places where things could have gone wrong, but I'm really lucky to have gotten where I am right now. And so I interviewed for an intern position as a software engineer in fall of 2015. That was my junior year of college. I got accepted for that internship soon after, and I took my internship in the summer 2016. And then I got my full-time offer and converted to a full-time engineer in summer 2017. So that was my timeline for that. And so why did I want to join Microsoft? Well, Microsoft does a lot of different things, and there's a lot of places where I can go. I didn't really think much about the cloud back then, but there are a lot of other opportunities that I wanted to get involved in. I initially talked about getting into Windows to the career fair recruiter, but I got into the cloud group, and I think that was definitely a better fit for me. I really like being in part of the cloud, and great thing about Microsoft is that there's also a lot of internal mobility, and that means I can just hop around to different roles if I want to. There are things like healthcare, there's Xbox, there's a lot of things that I could do inside of Microsoft, which is great. And every other company is in like the Bay Area, but since Microsoft's in Seattle, I really like the fact that it was in Seattle because Seattle's a great place. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I actually kind of like it when it rains here. and that's when I actually thrive. And it's so close to a lot of great things, like going to Vancouver for a day trip, or Portland is easily accessible, and I think that's really, really great. And when I was interviewing for full-time positions in my senior year in fall of 2016, I did interview with a couple other companies, but unfortunately their technical interviews were just way too hard. Like Google's was just, it was just, wow, that was really difficult. So unfortunately I didn't get any other opportunities, but I'm still really glad that I took this Microsoft one, because it's really stands out against the other ones. And so let's talk a little bit about the cloud. You might have heard that the cloud is just someone else's computer. This is pretty true, but there's a lot of other things going on in the background. If you take your computer, just think about a lot of computers in giant buildings all around the globe. So if there's like probably 1,000 computers sitting in Oregon, that's where Google's data center is. There's 1,000 computers sitting in Virginia, that's where a lot of other servers are. And so these are all networked, and that's really what the cloud is. And how these computers are being used is that they're used to serve websites, they're used to do scientific computations like folding the proteins of the COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, and just financial transactions, stock market. We're also even in space now, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the cloud does a lot of things, and we're using the cloud right now with Twitch, with Discord, with everything else. We're all cloud-based now. And so what I currently do in my role at Microsoft is that I'm a software engineer on the Azure Portal team at Microsoft. And what the Azure Portal is that it's the front page for everything Azure related. So if you want to manage your cloud resources like virtual machines, SQL databases, or if you want to store files on Azure, you would go to the portal as the first place to manage all of these resources and assets. And so this kind of links to the question of there must be a lot of front-end engineers on this team then. That's true. There's a lot of front-end engineers. I have a lot of colleagues who work a lot on the TypeScript front-end for this service. But personally, I work on the back-end infrastructure for this service. And so we're more of like a DevOps mentality team. But what do we mean by back-end and infrastructure, and what is DevOps? You might have not heard these terms before, but first, to disambiguate the terminology of back-end, front-end, whatever, the front-end is everything that you can interact with. So think about things like Google Maps, just scrolling around on that map and figuring out the directions. That's the front-end that you're interacting with. Or the Facebook newsfeed, or the Instagram app. These are all examples of the front end of specific services. And the back end is kind of it's everything that's behind the scenes that wires things together. So when you click that like button, or if you double tap on a picture on Instagram, the logic that actually happens to record that like is the back end. So the back end is the one that actually says, oh, this person liked this photo, I'm going to increment the database to add 1 to the like counter or whatever. And when somebody says that they're a full stack developer, they're basically doing both things. They're architecting the front end, which is where they're kind of designing everything and making sure everything looks correct in terms of user interface and user experience. And then they're also wiring up all of these front end experiences to logic, control flows, etc. And so in DevOps is fairly new terminology in the last 5 to 10 years. And what it is, it's a mindset where that mixes kind of the workflow of development, so things like writing code, testing it, and mixes it in with an operations mindset. So making sure that your code is scalable, making sure your code is resilient to failure. And this mentality has driven a lot of companies in the last few years to make their systems more resilient to breaking down. And when we talk about infrastructure, that really ties into DevOps, because a lot of DevOps is you have to think about the infrastructure and make sure that infrastructure is up to date. It's has the latest patches and it works seamlessly. And when we think about infrastructure, let's first think about the infrastructure that we have in the physical world. We have things like paved roads, mass transit systems, and the ability to travel across an ocean in less than a day via an airplane. If we didn't have the infrastructure like airports or the actual rail lines that we're able to take in Seattle or something like that, we wouldn't be able to really do anything like go anywhere. And so that's really the power of physical infrastructure. But we can kind of use the same analogies on digital infrastructure, because without anybody managing the digital infrastructure, we wouldn't have our Discord servers, our messenger chats, video calls on Duo or whatever during COVID, and you can't watch Netflix or anything like that. So there's this big chunk of things that we have to think about that is usually pretty invisible to everybody's daily life. And so I've always been really excited about infrastructure, but I never really thought too much about working as an infrastructure engineer until I actually came to Microsoft. And how I've been really excited about it is that I've done a lot of infrastructure related things ever since like middle school. So the first thing that I did was I ran server software when I was in middle school. I started my own web server. I would always make random PHP pages and just send them to my friends just to see what they thought. And I ran a small Minecraft server for my friends as well. And so I bought a small little what we call a virtual private server, and I ran a Minecraft server on that. I know it's a lot easier these days, but back then it wasn't particularly simple to do, and we had to do a lot of things like get the right server, which was not. I also had to do this on a budget, and that made it a lot more difficult. But I did a lot of the behind the scenes tech work in high school, so managing like the announcements, making sure that the speaker wires are plugged in correctly at rallies and stuff like that, and at large events. And I really like to tinker with computer networks or Linux and just play around with these infrastructure related things in my day-to-day. And so my first project at work was to migrate our internal code base to Git. And I've used Git in the past, but this is where I really got a big exposure to how Git works and what makes Git tick. And I had a lot of fun doing this compared to my previous work on just working on front end, writing TypeScript code and everything. And it might sound a little mundane to migrate code to Git, but I had a lot of fun in making sure that the build worked perfectly, that the tests still ran as they should have, and there was a lot of wiring that I really enjoyed doing. And in my free time now, I really like to play with infrastructure software like Kubernetes and Docker. I actually just went to KubeCon, which is the conference for Kubernetes, in this past week, and there are a lot of great talks that I was really excited to hear about. And in the picture there, you can kind of see what is right beside me right now. That's my little server corner where I have things like Raspberry Pis and routers and a giant server running that just stores all my data. And so the thing about infrastructure is that it's one of the things that's most commonly said is that nobody knows what I do until I don't do it. And that's pretty true, because if we think about things like outages, let's think about like the time that Cloudflare went down for a few hours a few months ago, and a lot of the outages that have happened since then. Nobody really noticed that they were there until they break. And when they broke, then people just went on Twitter and was just like, why is YouTube down, and things like that. And it sucks to see that your service is down and that it's frustrating a lot of people, but it's foundational work, and I think it's a lot of fun to manage infrastructure on big projects like this. And so what is it exactly that I do? And I mentioned that I was a backend and infrastructure engineer, but what I work on specifically is I work on a TypeScript project that runs in Node, and this is a backend service that is pretty much a content delivery mechanism. There's a lot of things, we call it internally the hosting service, because we host a lot of code for the Azure portal. And the engineering involved in this is there's a lot of technical aspects of getting these bits of code into the Azure portal for users to run, because we have to do this in a performant way that makes sure that we don't have to have the users spinning in their chairs for like a minute while our portal loads. We have to make this as fast as possible, and this is really how we do it. And in addition to this, I also manage the infrastructure for this service, so things like virtual machines, the databases behind this, and making sure that our code gets deployed twice a week. And so these are the couple of different things that I manage. And so if we talk quickly about my day-to-day, I usually log in around 10 a.m. So I log in on Teams, I look at my email, and maybe there might be a few work items that I can just tackle, like looking at small little bugs or looking at data or something like that. After that, I'll usually have a 15 to 30 minute stand-up with my team where I get to interact with them and see what everybody else is up to. Then I'll take my lunch break, and after my lunch break, I'll just be doing work. This is when a lot of the big items come in, so I'll usually have meetings or something like that. And so my work usually involves looking at data to figure out why bugs happen, or writing code, or figuring out how to write code. Figuring out how to write code is a big time chunk, and it's more this than actually writing the code, believe it or not. And so that's usually my time from 1 to 5, because that's when everybody's usually online. I can talk to people, I can ping people for questions. And then from 5 to 6 is usually when I really get to focus down on code, and I usually am able to write code, debug it, figure out why tests are failing, things like that. So this is usually my day. Not much has changed since COVID. This is what I used to do back when we were in person as well. It's just that now everything is just on Teams. And so yeah, this is what I do every day. And so let's take a quick deep dive into what the infrastructure might be for a service like Discord. This is just a hypothetical case study. I don't actually work for Discord, but here's my best guess for what's going on under the hood at Discord. And I don't know exactly, because companies are very, very, they don't really share any details about how exactly their services are architected. They just give hints on how it's done. This, I understand why. It's because of security and everything like that. So we might not ever know how Discord actually runs. But services like Discord are architected for modularity and scalability. And what this is that there's a lot of services that make up the whole. So we have to break down the giant idea of Discord into smaller things. Things like authentication, voice, video, chat, presence, and separate guilds and everything of that. And this is to make sure that if one tiny component goes down, if one small computer goes down, it doesn't shut down the entire system, because computers go down. You can't trust computers 100%. Sometimes they go down and you don't know why. So this is why we architect, to make sure that every little component is containerized. And so I was doing a lot of research for this particular infrastructure thing, and a lot of the things that I talk about here are backed by a couple of things that I found online. I found a few unofficial guides on how Discord might be running their infrastructure, but of course we never know exactly how, because none of us work at Discord. But first, let's think about how messages might be sent through a particular Discord server. So if we think about like the Redmond STEM Center server, you might be sending messages in and out of it. So what happens there is that if I send a message, and if I'm sitting in like Southern California, let's say, then that message will get sent to the Discord service cluster that's in that region. So US West 2 is the Google Cloud region in Southern California. And so I will be communicating with that server directly. You, on the other hand, if you're sitting in Seattle, you might be communicating with US West 1, which is Seattle for Google Cloud. And you might think about other regions like Europe, Australia, Asia, whatever, all of them have their own regions, but they probably also have their own service clusters. We'll talk a little bit more about what these service clusters might be in the future. But if you type in a message, it will probably get sent down a message queue, and this message queue is probably a global instance for that particular server. And what happens in this queue is that as messages go in, each message that goes in has to come out, be sent to all the other clients, and also get stored in a central database. And we know that for Discord that they use a distributed database called Apache Cassandra. And so this is just a very brief look at what it might look like. But if we think about especially the Discord service cluster, we might have a lot of different services in this giant mesh of services. We usually call it the service mesh in software engineering, but it's built up of a lot of these different small things. Like you have, like I said, authentication and authorization service. You have a service that deals with when you send a picture or a video inside of a Discord server and then process it. You have a service that takes in your voice that you speak it, like the voice input when you actually go into a voice chat, and processes it out and sends it to other people. There's a lot of these things that make up the whole that is Discord, and there's a lot of things that are invisible to us. And like I said, we might not know what's in here, but this is definitely what has to go in as like a baseline. And you're not going to interact with all of these. The two kind of front ends that you'll be interacting with when you start Discord is the REST API service and the WebSocket service. These two are different things. They're kind of technical, but this is like the first place where you would interact with Discord servers. And so it's really complicated, right? There's in that slide right beforehand, there was a lot of services that were just swimming in that service mesh soup. It's like it's just there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle, and Discord has to solve this puzzle to make sure that everything works the way that it should be. They have to engineer every piece of this puzzle for reliability, and so that's where we apply things like Kubernetes, containerization, a lot of these specialized words that's in software engineering these days. And when you're breaking down services like these, you can apply the same concepts to things like Instagram or Spotify, Twitch, whatever. All of them have probably these microservices, as we call them, to handle different things. This is just one architecture of many. There's also things like monoliths and a lot of pub sub, whatever. So this isn't the definitive service architecture for a company. And the great thing nowadays is that a lot of companies are more open about how their infrastructure works and the things that they've learned from their work on infrastructure. So things like so places like Airbnb have great blogs where they talk about their challenges of migrating to something different in Kubernetes, or how they migrated from React Native to an actual native application on Android or whatever. A lot of companies will showcase these, which is great. And so we're running out of time here. We're just shy of 2 p.m., but let's bring it back and talk about the core points of my presentation. First thing is that the alternate route is not necessarily the worst one. Like we talked about before, you can't shut off every idea that you don't really know enough about, and so you have to discover every path and figure out why it might not work for you. And so community college is always an option to consider, especially if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't know what you're passionate about. And without that experience of going to community college, I don't think I'd be where I am right now. And the other thing that I want to leave you with is that the behind the scenes work is invisible. We don't think about things like how airports are engineered, how websites like Instagram are engineered, but because it's invisible. But I think it's still really rewarding, and I really love being able to work on this behind the scenes work. And so what if you ask me what are some things that I can do right now? There's a couple of things that you can start doing right now. First, leverage your resources and build your network. And that's possible through the great things like Redmond STEM Center, where you have a community of people that are like-minded, and you feel comfortable talking to other people and seeing what other ideas people might have on things. Because people are really friendly. People are usually open to sharing what they're up to, and everybody wants to help. It's just a matter of reaching out to them. Like if you know somebody who is who is a researcher in college or something like that, it's always great to just reach out to them and see what they're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, that's perfectly fine. If you're listening to this, you must be interested in STEM at least, and that's always a great starting point. STEM has so many career opportunities, and there are so many places to start. But even then, if you don't know what you're doing, it's fine. Nobody figures out everything even after they start their degree. Like some people will take a couple years and switch majors before they land on the thing that they really love to do. And another lesson is just always consider all of your options. Don't just dismiss an idea off the bat. I think just take the time to think about why an idea might not work out for you, and especially if it's a big decision, it's always worth it to just think about the pros and cons and see why it might not work for you. And I think always an important thing is just experimenting and try something new. You have a lot of time in high school, even if you might not think so. But I would definitely suggest just trying different things like learning TensorFlow, learning Onshape, Ableton Live, Mandarin, whatever. This is really the time when the skills that you're just building for fun will stick with you in the future, and you'll be really glad that you learned it right now. Because right now I don't have that much time to experiment, but I'm really glad that I did things in high school. Like I learned After Effects in high school, just on a whim, and I'm really glad that I did that because that was a lot of fun. So if you have something that you're just kind of interested in, like if you want to learn how to make music on Ableton Live, then there's a lot of great opportunities out there and a lot of resources on YouTube. Just do it. I think it's a lot of fun. But with that, I want to bring it back, and I'll see if we have any questions. Let's see. Centralization is a double-edged blade. Yes, centralization is definitely a double-edged blade. It's great to have things centralized because that makes it so much easier to architect your software. But then you have the issues of centralization, which is like a central failure point, and it's security vulnerabilities. There's a lot of issues that comes up with centralization. But decentralization is also really difficult to deal with. Are there any other questions? Eric, feel free to unmute because I have the output for you available. But if that's it, is that it?
All right. Hi, I'm Eric. I don't think I introduced myself beforehand, but
Go ahead.
I actually do have some questions for you, Kevin.
Sure, go ahead.
If you could unmute in Discord so it's not delayed, that'd be great.
Wait, I have to unmute in Discord?
All right. So, one of my questions was, I know you talked about a lot of your past and your experiences there. What experiences or goals do you have for your future, or how do you want to proceed in your career?
So you're asking what are my goals right now, right? All right, that's why you said unmute. Okay, you're asking right now what are my goals?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So right now, the goals that I'm working on is that in the future, I do want to be able to hone my skills as a software engineer and work on something more specialized. I think what I want to get more into is the biotech or computational biology side of things, because I think that's really interesting. So I think that will be a great career path for me to look into. And a lot of other things that I want to do is things like mentoring a robotics team or helping start a STEM community center. So that's why I started mentoring at the FRC team here. So those are my immediate goals. I hope that answers your question.
Yep.
In terms of other goals, I can't think of. There's a lot of small little goals that I try to have. I'm trying to learn more languages right now. My parents are Vietnamese, so I'm trying to learn more Vietnamese, just to be able to talk in Vietnamese. What other things do I have? I'm trying to build myself a personal server setup just for fun. Yeah, hopefully that gives you a good overview of the goals that I have.
Yeah, that sounds really great. Um, One more thing is, if there were people watching in the audience who listened to your talk about DevOps and infrastructure and wish to pursue that themselves, what's one resource that you could give them or recommend?
So for DevOps, if you want to learn more about DevOps, there's just so many resources out there for infrastructure things in DevOps in general. There are a lot of communities on Reddit about DevOps, so things like r/DevOps, r/servers, r/self-hosted. These are great resources to get started. There are always a lot of conferences about DevOps. So KubeCon is a huge conference that's about Kubernetes. That's a giant infrastructure tool. And so I think seeking those out will be a great resource as well. And if you're interested in like starting servers and things like that, I'd say grab a Raspberry Pi, play around with Linux, and see what you can make with it. You can make a Pi-hole, which is like a ad blocking software on the local network scale. You can start your own cloud, which means like you can upload photos and files. You can host your own website on Raspberry Pi. The resources are infinite, and I think a great place to start is if you want to find the community, go on Reddit. There's conferences and Redmond STEM Center.
Wow, Redmond STEM Center. That sounds like a great opportunity for people to make connections and
I know.
start
They
that
should join
networking.
using that link right there in that top right hand corner.
True. Um, all right. There are a few more questions in the chat. I'll just read them out.
Okay.
Um, First, Build Upon says your point about having a lot of time in high school. Often, I have so many things I want to do that it feels like I have to prioritize what activities are more worth doing than others. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Let me think about that a bit. That's a really good question because I think in high school it definitely comes down to that, right? It always comes down to having to prioritize things over others, and I think a common pitfall that happens in high school. This happened to me and a lot of other friends who were in high school, is that we tried to do everything at once and we didn't try to focus our energy on anything. And so I think a crucial thing to do in high school is to just have the ability to say no to a lot of things, a lot of opportunities, because you can't be spreading yourself around too thin, and it sucks to say no to opportunities. And I even saying that right now, it hurts me to say no to opportunities, but sometimes you can see that there might be more value in some specific opportunities than others. And I think to evaluate that, you have to consider what that'll bring for you in the future. If you want to start a website because you think it might be fun, I mean, go for it. But if you have the opportunity to, I don't know, do research with a professor at UW, I think maybe that would probably take precedence, because there's a lot of, it's really simple to create a website these days, and I think that's something that could easily be picked up in a day. But I hope that answers your question. Build upon. It's difficult to prioritize things, but sometimes you just have to say no. I think don't spread yourself out too thin. I think is the main thing that I would want to say in that circumstance.
Following up on that, how short is my name? Asks how much is too much in terms of opportunity, like extracurriculars or
Yeah,
different things you're doing.
that really depends on the person. I think if you feel like that's where it comes into reflection. You have to reflect on yourself and think about how you feel. If you feel stressed out and if you're not getting enough sleep, and sleep is very important, guys. Please sleep more. Then consider scaling back your activities. And like I said, everybody is different. Some people might feel that they can only take on one thing at a time, but some people feel that they can take on 3 things at a time. This is a really hard balance that you have to kind of figure out for yourself. If you're good with managing your time, if you're good at context switching into different things, then maybe 3 or 4 is too much. But if you're not particularly good at time management like I am, then maybe 1 thing is just enough. It's a really hard balance that you have to figure it for yourself, and I unfortunately can't give you a straight answer right now, but something that you have to figure out for yourself, I think.
Great. Speaking of someone who does too much, Max Wang 1024 asks, do you have any plans to continue your education and obtain a higher degree?
I have gotten that question from my friends who are currently in grad school, and I think it's something that I would definitely want to do because the thing about a lot of the fields that we're going into, like the STEM fields in undergrad, is that undergrad is a great way to just get exposure and a deep enough understanding for the concepts that you can do your job at a good pace. But where grad school really comes into play is that it helps you specialize and figure out how you can apply this particular skill in a certain way. So I have friends who are doing things like optics. I have a friend who's doing plant science and specifically like the genetics of corn roots, I think is the research that she's doing right now. And so I think for me, the next path in terms of higher education would be go to grad school, be specialized in maybe biotechnology or computational biology, and use that specialization to my advantage. I think that's really the key play when it comes to higher education, I think, in my opinion.
All right, sounds good. I think those are all of the last content questions. To wrap up, how can people contact you? Is there
That's a
any
great
way
question.
that you...
So this is how you can email me. You can email me. You can ping me on Discord. If you're in the Redmond STEM Center, then my name is just Kevin. I have that little Omega logo in. Yeah, I'm in the Redmond STEM Center chat. If you want to just ping me. If you want to email me, you can email me here. You can ping Eric, and Eric will know how to reach me. But for the most part, you can probably just ping me on Discord, and I'll respond. Yeah, I think that's it.
Great.
Hopefully, I answered all of your questions correctly. If you want to follow up with me and get a deeper or more personalized answer to your question, then reach out to me on DM, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions, especially in terms of like prioritization and figuring out the things that you want to do in high school. Because I know that's really difficult, and it's hard to find that balance. So, I mean, let me know if there's anything you want to talk about. Cool. With that, we'll wrap it up. And thanks everybody for coming in. Yeah, see y'all later.
Yeah. Stay tuned for the next webinar, which will be held.
Wait, sorry, Eric, hold on. Say, you'll have to repeat it. Wait, input, crap.
Okay. All right. Feel free to stay tuned for next month's webinar, which will most likely be from a high school student. So that will be a new experience, and I hope to see you guys there.